Thank you to iFixit for sponsoring this video. I paid $1,750 for 25 Xbox Elite controllers. Now it's time to diagnose them and figure out what's wrong and see if I can fix them. But first of all, I'd like to thank iFixit for providing tools and parts to me, as well as sponsoring these videos. They've been enabling my bad purchases for months now, and they've been providing you with coupon codes so you can get discounts on all your tools and supplies. If you want to get your discount of $10 off $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/TronicsFix. Now let's get these controllers diagnosed. So I'm going to test each one of these controllers so I know exactly what's wrong with them, and also I know what parts to buy and what all needs to be fixed. Let's take a look at the first controller. Okay, and this one actually has all of the accessories, which is great. And first thing I notice is this is very obviously broken off right here. So we got one of the shoulder buttons that's broken, but there could be other things wrong as well. So I'm gonna give this a test, see what all's wrong. Okay, and after testing with the gamepad pet tester, I can confirm that this is the only part that needs replaced on this first controller. So now I'm gonna go through and do that process for all the rest of the controllers, and then I'll come back and let you know what I find and what all we need to fix. So I am now halfway done testing and diagnosing them, and I can say this is gonna be a big job. Most of them have at least 2 issues, some of them have 3, and that's just out of the things I've tested. I haven't tested the buttons on the very bottom, as I wanna get all of the main buttons tested and repaired first. One of the problems I knew I was gonna have with these controllers is that parts are hard to find and actually extremely expensive. So unfortunately, these are not something that I'm gonna be trying to make money on. I knew that going into it, but I still love the idea of fixing these anyways and keeping them from going right into the landfill. And just like that, all 25 of them had been tested and diagnosed. There was only 2 that I didn't find any problems at all. The rest had, almost all of them had multiple problems. So now it's time to get started on the repairs, and let's start with number 1. So it turns out I don't actually have any of the shoulder buttons in stock right now, so I am gonna have to buy some of those. I've got them ordered from Amazon. I'll leave a link down in the description below if you need to buy them, but I'm gonna skip any of the ones that need the LB or RB buttons and do all the rest that don't need those. Number 4, we've got a rumble motor that's weak. The analog stick is not registering when pressing down on the left stick. I'm going to be using a T9 bit to remove these screws. And I don't see any problems at all so far. This is the analog stick that's given us a problem, as well as this rumble motor. Next, I'm going to remove this smaller board so we can inspect this other board. And this screw size is a T6. Now we can pull this up. Okay, I actually don't see any issues at all. Let me zoom in here for you. So it's this analog stick. This button is not registering when I press it. And then also this rumble motor here. So when I press this button, we can test this rumble motor. And you can see it just doesn't go that fast, especially when we compare it to the other side. You can see that goes way faster. So I've got an extra rumble motor here. I'm gonna try and replace this rumble motor with this known good working rumble motor just to see if it is the motor itself. I don't think it is, but it's worth a try just to see if that fixes it. Now I'll press this button again and see if this motor works any better. And no, it works basically exactly the same. I'm actually going to use number 5. This one has a left analog stick problem. The RB button is broken. And this one, the right vibrator motor is weak. So this should be an interesting test. I'm going to take the board out of this Xbox One Elite and put it into number 4 and see what changes. So this board is from a different controller that has the right rumble motor not working properly. So let's check the left one and see how it works on this controller. And here we go. Still slow. This is controller number 6. I had to take yet another controller apart because the rumble motor in number 5 actually went about the same speed as number 4. But I think I have it figured out what's going on. So watch the rumble motor in number 6 when I press this button. You can see about the speed it goes, but also notice another thing. This vibrator motor inside the button also works very well. You should be able to hear that through the microphone. Now let me hook up number 4. Now remember number 4, what I wrote down on the paper was the rumble motor was weak. So let's check the rumble motor on number 4. And you can see that it spins about the same speed as number 6. But the one thing that number 4 does not do is this little vibrator motor up here does not spin at all. You should be able to hear that there is no vibration coming from this motor. When I took apart number 5 to use parts off of, I noticed that number 5 also had a rumble motor that went about the same speed as number 4. So that's why I had to take apart number 6. And I think the problem is actually this little vibrator motor. It just tricked me when I was testing it. I didn't feel the vibration from this, and that kind of tricked my mind into thinking that this rumble motor itself wasn't spinning like it should. So now I'm going to replace this motor here, then we'll get to the analog stick issue, and then we'll test it all and see if we got it figured out. So what I'm going to do is actually connect the vibrator motor from this controller and connect it to this board to see if that makes the vibrator motor work on this controller. And if it does, then that confirms that it is something either in this wire or the actual vibrator motor itself. So now when I touch this magnet to this component right here, this vibrator motor should spin. Let's see if it does. And it does. So that tells me most likely this vibrator motor is faulty, so I'm going to get that replaced. Then we'll move on to repairing the rest of this controller. Plugged in, let's check it out. There we go. So this vibrator motor, and I already found the problem. So if I would have been looking closer, I would have found that this vibrator motor just has a broken wire, and that's the only problem with this one. So I'm going to keep this one around so I can use it for parts if needed, but it just goes to show if you pay attention, sometimes you can save yourself a lot of trouble. So this button right here presses down completely normally. You can see the button pushing, but unfortunately it doesn't register. And when I put a different board into this controller, it registers just fine. That tells me that this analog stick needs to be replaced. Unfortunately, there's not really a great way to clean this type of button, and I can't just replace the button itself because it's so integrated into this analog stick. So I just have to replace the whole analog stick, so I'm gonna do that next. Now I'm gonna heat all these solder joints up at once with my hot air station to let this old analog stick drop out the bottom. There's several ways you can install the new stick. One of them is to just keep all the solder joints liquid and then push up the new analog stick through the holes. One of the difficult things about that is that all of this solder has to be liquid all at the same time, and all of these little pins have to line up with the holes in the motherboard. Now, if you watch my PS4 controller repair video, you watch me just push this up through the holes, and that can work fine if you get some practice and get good at it. I'm gonna show you another way to do it where I keep the solder melted one hole at a time and use a solder sucker to clear out the hole, and then I will push up this analog stick through the holes and then manually solder each joint. These just help keep my hands protected a little bit from the heat. Now I can make sure this analog stick is lined up correctly. I'm gonna push all the pins up through the holes. It looks like I still got a little bit of solder right down there in that joint, and that's causing it to not come up. And now all the solder is cleared out of all the holes, and I can push this new analog stick up through the holes. I do want to make sure that it is aligned nice and flat on the board, which this one is, so now I can solder all the joints on the bottom of the board. And there we go. How's it look? All of these little joints are all soldered on correctly, nice and shiny. I did fix this joint. I don't see any other problems here, so I think now it's time to get it back in the controller and give it a test. All right, I've got this together enough to test. So I'm gonna plug it in, see if everything works how it should. Okay. And each time I press them, these light up. And they also don't drift. And all the other functions work fine on this controller, so our first fix, controller number 4, is totally fixed. I've got to get it all back together, then I do need to test the buttons on the underside of it, but we have our first repaired Xbox One Elite controller. Only 24 more. I showed pretty in depth how to disassemble it, quite a few of the fixes, and how to reassemble at least most of it, so I'm not gonna show those same fixes or assembling it in the rest of the controllers, but I will show how to fix all the new issues in the rest of the 24 Xbox Elite controllers. Number 7 has an X button that's squishy, so I'm gonna get it all taken apart and see what's going on with the X button. Okay, the button pad itself looks good. There are no tears anywhere, and it is nice and springy, so I don't think the problem is there. And there's the problem. So we got some sticky stuff on the X button, so I'll need to clean this button off, and then clean off the inside where the button slides through, and then this controller will be fixed. Controller number 7 is now done. All the buttons have a nice springy feel like they should. So now let's move on to the next controller. So number 11 has a right analog stick that drifts up. One of the things we might be able to do with this one is just clean it. So I'm gonna show you guys how to do that next, and we'll see if it actually works. So I'm gonna get this one taken apart, and now we can look at the analog stick. If you watch this part when I move the analog stick, you'll see that it moves just like that. That's because inside this piece there is what's called a potentiometer, and that little potentiometer inside there can get dirty and gunked up and sometimes just worn out. So what I'm gonna do is remove a clip over here and remove a clip over here and slide this potentiometer piece out so we can get a look in there, clean it all up, and then do the same on this side right here. Now with that piece pried off, I can remove this piece just like that. So this shows the inside piece of the potentiometer. There's little indents right here that contact the inside rings on this part of the analog stick down here. So I need to clean all those up, and I need to clean these rings up on this part and this part. Then we'll put it back together and see if that actually fixes it. Now I'm going to use a cleaning swab that doesn't have any pieces like a cotton one would, just to make sure that none of the pieces get stuck inside this ring. Now with this cleaned off and the rings inside the analog stick cleaned off, I can put this one back together and then clean this side. Okay, now both of those potentiometers have been cleaned. Let's get it hooked up to my computer and see if that fixed it. And unfortunately, it did not fix this issue. So sometimes that's a method that can work, but unfortunately in this case, it did not. So I'll be replacing that joystick along with this other joystick as well, as they both show that they are faulty. So I'm gonna get that done off camera. Let's move on to the next controller. Before we move on to the next controller, I did want to show you why sometimes cleaning these analog sticks just doesn't work. If you look closely, you can see right here these marks on this black track. That's where these little pieces of metal ride, and that's how the analog stick registers which way you want your character to go. You'll also notice these marks right here and right here. That corresponds with this metal piece and that metal piece. So looking at these marks on the black tracks, you can just see how the black part is just worn down. There's pretty deep grooves on here and right on here, and that's right where these metal pieces ride. So unfortunately, there's just not enough good contact there for the analog stick to register which way you want your character to go. So that's why sometimes cleaning these just doesn't work. So I was going to replace both the sticks in number 11, but given that there's a lot of good parts on number 11, I'm also going to use that as a parts controller, so I can use things like these LB and RB buttons on a different controller. So number 11 is also going to be used for parts. Let's move on to number 12. For number 12, the LB button sticks, let's just verify that real quick. Yep, there's no clicking sound. You can see the RB clicks fine and moves fine. The LB is stuck. So I'm going to take it apart so we can take a look and see if it is a problem with this part or the button itself. And I do want to know, if you don't want to use your fingernails to get in there, that can be pretty hard on your fingers. So if you don't want to do that, you can get a plastic pry tool and just pry right at this corner. There is a little piece of plastic right here that could definitely cause that problem. So let's fix that right now. Now let's try it. And there we go, fixed. Number 14 only has cosmetic problems. It's got bad grips. Luckily, we have two controllers that we're using for parts, so I'm gonna use one of the grips off of those to repair number 14. Much better. Now that 14's done, let's move on to number 15. Number 15, the left analog stick and LB button. You already know what we're gonna do with that. Just gonna save that one for later. Number 16 has a bad LB button. Now that I think of it, I'm gonna use one of the parts off of one of my parts controllers and just replace the LB button. And then test to make sure that the buttons are working correctly. Green button is installed. And these clips are on the back of the charge port. Everything looks good, charge port's aligned. Now, this one's done. I can put it back together and move on to number 17. So for number 17, the left analog stick drifts, I'm gonna try just replacing the potentiometer itself, which only requires 3 solder joints to be removed and then soldered back on. So let's try that and see if we can get this one working without replacing the entire analog stick. So I did just mark right here to make sure I didn't get confused which one I needed to replace. So I'm gonna flip this over and remove the solder on the 3 joints that hold it on, then slip a new one in and solder it down. Now we have most of the solder out of the joints. I'm gonna wiggle this around and should be able to get it pulled out. And there we go. So that is the faulty potentiometer. Now I'm going to put a new one in, get it soldered in, and then we'll test it and see if that fixes it. Now also, if you look right down here, you can see there's some sticky gunk right on this pin where the potentiometer goes through, and also sticky gunk along right where the potentiometer rests. And if you look inside the potentiometer itself, you can see the gunk buildup right on that inner ring. So I need to clean that off. And here is the new one. So I need to go in these holes carefully. Okay, and the new potentiometer has been fitted. So now all I have to do is solder it back on and then we can test it and see if that method works. And here we have both of the analog sticks. The right one is working well as usual. The left one has 0 drift. So that method definitely works. So it's just another way if you're having a problem, especially if you're having a problem only one axis, that means you can just go in and replace that one specific potentiometer and you don't have to do the entire analog stick. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of talking about analog sticks. I'm tired of showing it on camera, so I'm not gonna show any more in this video. I'm just gonna show the new things that we haven't looked at yet. Controllers 18, 19, and 20 have LB button problems as well as analog stick problems, so I'm gonna save those for when I get the LB and RB buttons in stock. Let's move on to 21. 21 and 22 both have left analog stick problems. Let's move on to number 23. Number 23 won't connect to my testing software and keeps disconnecting from my computer. We've finally got a new problem, so let's take a close look at this and see what's going on. And I'm gonna take a wild guess that this is at least part of the problem. So here we have that same chip that had the liquid damage, and if you look closely, there are 3 pads, this one, and this one, that basically have no solder on them. At least that's very visible. This solder over here looks pretty good. This component right here is actually loose on the board. If I move it, you can see that. So we need to clean that up. So I'm gonna put some flux on all this. I'm gonna clean it up with a toothbrush, then put some flux on it. See if we can get enough solder on these joints to feel good about them. Hopefully we don't have to replace this chip, but if we do, we do. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So that piece that just came off of this circuit right here was the end of this capacitor. So unfortunately, this capacitor will not work. So I will take a capacitor off of one of these other parts controllers I have over here and install it onto this one. So not the prettiest soldering job, but it is a strong one. So this one should be all fixed and it's ready to put back in and test. Oh, it's still not showing as connected in my software though. So this is the good board that I removed this capacitor from. If we look closely, this end of the capacitor is connected right here, and it's connected over to this pin right here. So this is all one trace. When I look at the capacitor on the faulty board, I see that the trace is broken right here, and there's no connection from here over to here. So I believe this is the most likely cause of the problem. So we need to create a connection from here over to here. To do that, I'm going to be using a wiring pencil. You can actually find these on my website at TronicsFixStore.com. This is basically a pencil with a spool of wire at one end that goes down through the shaft of the pencil, and then it comes down here, and it just makes working with the wire much easier and faster. So I'm going to attach the wire over here, and then also attach the wire over onto this trace. This wiring pencil does have enameled wire, which means there is a coating on the wire. So you need to remove that coating in order for it to stick to the solder. So that's how easy and quick it is to do this type of repair with that wiring pencil. Now that this circuit has been restored, it's time to clean it up, test it, and see if it works. Okay, and it is actually recognized by my computer now. And here we go, we can actually test it. So that seems to have fixed the problem with controller number 23. Let's move on to the next controller. Oh no, this is no good. So unfortunately, this brand new part that I bought is defective. I have fixed a total of 15 and I've used 3 for parts. Unfortunately, I don't have any more parts here to repair these right now, so I'll have to fix the other 7 off camera, but I am gonna end this video now or else it's just gonna get too long. Be sure to check out ifixit.com/TronicsFix if you'd like to get $10 off your order of $50 or more. Thank you again to iFixit for sponsoring this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.